In his treatise on free will, philosopher Sam Harris claims that if an act is formulated in our subconscious, then that act cannot be said to be willed by us. A reflex action to catch a ball, an instinctual action to blink in heavy sunlight, or the act of breathing are all acts that are not consciously chosen by us, but automatic, spontaneous events. Something that is automatic is not willed or decided, but to a large extent predetermined by the factors that create it. The blink is created by the sunlight, and for the same reason, we cannot necessarily control these acts. Subconscious decisions extend beyond reflex actions to everyday life. The most famous example is the purchase of everyday consumer products, as influenced by the power of advertising. In the 1950s and 60s, the field of advertising had an influx of psychologists working around the clock to determine what subconscious motivators determined human action. The old paradigm of one kind of consumer motivated by why a product was a good purchase was quickly subsumed by the idea that there were many types of consumers, all motivated by subconscious desire. Instead of selling cars, advertisers began to sell male cars and female cars, old people cars and young people cars, and so on, using the presumed personality traits of these distinctive demographic groups. The biggest revelation, however, came with the idea that human behavior was not a result of conscious thought, but a result of unconscious efforts to control inner drives and instincts motivated by petty emotions, sexual desire, and anxiety. Humans were not as disciplined and rational as first thought, but were instead irrationally motivated by their wants and needs. Our subconscious desires, by nature of being subconscious, are subject to a particular kind of psychological manipulation by advertisers. The most famous example is through the use of sexual imagery. The epithet sex sells is based on the idea that sexual imagery often correlates to an increase in the sale of a product. This is only partially true, as recent research finds that sex only sells if the product itself is considered sexy. Sexual imagery in advertising does, however, light up regions of the brain that are linked to an increase in financial risk-taking, and so subconsciously compels us to take risks we may otherwise not have taken. Inspired by neurotechnological breakthroughs, the advertising industry has turned towards the use of brain scanning technology to determine the subconscious desires of consumers. A recent book called Biology collected findings from numerous studies in neuromarketing, concluding that subliminal advertising works. And bypasses conscious rational thought or conscious objections. Emotional reactions to products can be implanted into the subconscious mind, and increased brain activity during an advert may be linked to an increased desire to buy the products. The fact that the advertising industry today is relying firstly on brain scanning technology is alarming. It is particularly worrying that these technologies are uncovering our subconscious motivation. As Sam Harris suggests, if an act is formulated in our subconscious, then that act cannot be said to be willed by us. If an act or purchase of a product is formulated first in our subconscious, and then concluded upon in our conscious mind, then have we retained our free will?
The second assumption is that each of us is the conscious author of our thoughts and actions. So that the part of you that thinks and perceives and experiences your life in the present moment is actually the author of your thoughts and choices and subsequent behavior. Now, the problem, unfortunately, is that we know that both of these assumptions are false. The first problem is that we live in a world of cause and effect. And either our wills are determined by a long chain of prior causes, and we're not responsible for them, or they're determined by some random influences, and we're not responsible for them.
It is not necessarily the case that advertisers are compelling consumers to buy products, but rather that they are compelling the subconscious needs and desires of consumers to shift towards a state that is best suited to buy the products. Advertisers play on emotions of nostalgia, targeting baby boomers with music from their 20s, or play on the emotions of love and compassion through scenes of romance or small children. But the most prominent and most successful emotional tool that they utilize to shift subconscious desire is fear. Fear of insecurity, rejection, loss, grief, or age. In the case of political advertising, the industry uses fear of the opponent candidate as the primary tool to persuade voters. Emory University psychologist Drew Wenston told CNN that fear-based attack ads are effective because they tap into a voter's subconscious. Although people say that they are not influenced by negative advertisements, when asked, tests reveal that they are subconsciously influenced. Their brains have reacted to the ad, whether they consciously recognize it or not. In one research study, a group watched Hillary Clinton's 3 a.m. campaign ad, which was intended to make voters question Barack Obama's experience.
It's 3 a.m. and your children are safe and asleep. But there's a phone in the White House and it's ringing. Something's happening in the world. Your vote will decide who answers that call. Whether it's someone who already knows the world's leaders, knows the military, someone tested and ready to lead in a dangerous world. It's 3 a.m. and your children are safe and asleep. Who do you want answering the phone?
I'm Hillary Clinton, and I approve this message.
Viewers said that the ad was fear-mongering and that it did not make them think Clinton was a stronger leader than Obama. But the data, Weston said, showed that their brains reacted differently. Voters had the greatest hesitation with words like weak and lightweight during the color test. Weston said this meant the ad made them question Obama's readiness. This happens because the ads trigger a response in the part of the brain called the amygdala, which experiences emotions such as fear. In the same way, ads about aging or health or hygiene are aimed squarely at provoking fears, and thus subconsciously increasing the desire of the remedy to that fear. Anti-aging creams, doctor visits, Lynx deodorant, and so on. The best thing we can do is to educate ourselves on the tools that advertisers are using so that we can consciously recognize when advertising is attempting to influence our subconscious decision-making, and to understand the rhetorical, psychological, and neuromarketing tools at the advertiser's disposal.